Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our fifth discussion in the series with Elizabeth Devlin, where we've been introducing the viewers to the Enneagram. As we've discussed in previous weeks, this is a map for inner exploration and self-awareness. And Elizabeth Devlin, who's joining me on the other side, welcome, Elizabeth. She has been well trained in the Enneagram. She's an experienced Enneagram teacher. She learned overseas with Helen Palmer, a psychologist, and David Daniels, a professor of psychiatry at Stanford University in America. Elizabeth also explained to us that she has been previously trained as a minister, and that is why she describes herself as having a bias in looking at the Enneagram from a spiritual perspective. She has liked to look very much in depth at the deeper spiritual differences between the Enneagram points and their deeper meaning. Now, Elizabeth, in the third part of the series, you spoke about habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and sensing, and you spoke about the head, the heart, and the gut centers of intelligence. I understand that there are different what we'd call positions on the Enneagram that are termed our stress and secure positions. This is what we're going to be speaking about this evening. Could you explain how this occurs, how these stress and secure positions on the Enneagram operate?
Thank you, Tanya. Yes. Hello, Patricia. Yes, for sure. In our everyday life, everyday situation, life just carries on and we develop a norm. Now, your norm might not be the same as my norm, and our thinking patterns tend to move along the same lines. We tend to think the same types of thoughts, and we generate patterns in our thinking, and we generally stick within narrow boundaries or borders, rarely extending ourselves. We rarely extend our potential to see something greater, something more. And so these thought patterns, they tend to, each point on the Enneagram has a different thought pattern, series of patterns. And our feeling from the heart, we have repetitive feelings. As an example, point ones on the Enneagram tend to feel criticized, even if they're not. Point twos tend to feel rejected, even if they're not. Point threes tend to feel a failure, even if they're not. And fours tend to feel abandoned, even if they're not. So the even if they're not goes round every point. And fives tend to feel a lack and pull in. And sixes tend to feel doubtful. Sevens tend to feel confined or limited. And eights actually feel vulnerable and easily betrayed. And nines tend to feel unimportant or lacking in worth. There are so many feelings that come up inside of us. And we actually don't want to explore them because some of them aren't very nice. We don't actually want to feel half of them. So we kind of avoid them. And we tend to sense the same things over and over again. We sense danger, or we sense threat, or we sense trouble in relationships. So our thinking patterns, our feelings develop into a pattern, and our sensing tends to develop into patterns. And that's just our normal everyday life.
Okay.
But when a little bit of stress occurs, sorry, Tanya, you want to say something?
Yes, so I just wanted to pick up on that theme that you were mentioning now, Liz, where you say these are our habitual patterns under normal everyday circumstances. And these habitual patterns can kind of become very humdrum. They get repeated, and not allowing a lot of difference perhaps in our interactions. However, that doesn't
Yes.
always stay the same, does it? Because
No.
we do tend to then go into a stressful situation. Could you maybe then explain what would happen to us then if we go into a more stressful situation where perhaps things do change for us?
Yes, thanks, Tanya. Yes, that's when life is running normally, but when a little bit of stress occurs, then we tend to consolidate more deeply into our point. We might
Okay.
become more threatened, we might become more doubtful, we might feel more criticized or more lacking. So we tend to exaggerate the existing patterns. But when stress doesn't let up, when it actually continues, another point tends to emerge and our thinking patterns change, our feelings change, and our responses also tend to change. And this can be quite alarming to us because we can think thoughts that we never thought of normally. I think, oh my goodness, or feelings tend to emerge that are out of the norm for us. And we think, I never would have thought of that, or I've never felt that before. And our responses change. And that can be quite scary sometimes. Because our responses to the situation can change.
Okay.
And what is actually happening is that our soul is offering us another strategy, another way of coping. Because obviously, the way we're thinking, the way we're feeling, and the way we're responding isn't working. So we're offered another point on the Enneagram to say, here you are. Our soul will always and forever support us. So the soul offers us another strategy, another way of being, and we can run with this. And then the opposite occurs when life is running smoothly. Let's say our finances are on track. Let's say our relationships are trouble-free and carefree. And let's say our profession is on track, or our workplace is all aligned. And then another point is, Melissa's struggling to hear.
Liz, she's
Another
struggling.
point comes to
Yeah.
the fore. So
Maybe
what
come
can
a
I
bit
do now
closer
then?
or try and turn up your volume a bit.
Okay,
I know
I'll
that
do that. Is
there
that
are some internet problems. Okay, let's hope
okay?
that
Is that
helps. Melissa, let us know. Melissa, let us know if you can hear Liz again.
okay? So under stress, when we're feeling a lot of stress, we get the support. We get a pillar of support from another point. And when we're feeling particularly secure, another point will come. So our primary point has these two pillars of support, which are always balancing and grounding us and supporting us. So I see these positions as pillars of support.
Yeah. Liz, yes, lovely. It looks like the sound is better now. Thank you, Melissa, for
Okay.
letting us know. Liz, would you like me to bring up the diagram so that you can show what you're talking about diagrammatically?
Yes, please, Tanya.
Okay. Because what you were saying is that we have our core point and then we have
Yes,
two other points that support.
yes. So let's start at point 9. Point 9, the pinnacle of the triangle, they have two pillars, point 3 and point 6, to hold 9 steady, to hold point 9, to nudge point 9 if they're overdoing something or underdoing something. And point 1 has the 4 and the 7 as pillars of support to keep the 1 on track, to keep the 1 healthy and grounded. And point 2 has points 8 and 4. Point 3 has points 9 and 6.
Okay.
Point 4 has points 2 and 1. I'll explain point 4 and point 5 in a little more detail. And point 5 has points 8 and 1. 6, of course, has 3 and 9. And 7 has 1 and 5. And 8.8 has 2 and 5 and back to 9. So the
Great.
arrows pointing away from the point tend to emerge when we're feeling stressful, but it's not always negative at all. And the arrow that points towards the existing point or my primary point tend to emerge when we're feeling particularly secure. So is that...
I love how you've described this, Liz, as 2 pillars of support. So bringing about that sense of groundedness.
Yes.
That you spoke about.
I feel quite strongly about that, because I think these pillars of support are offered to us by our soul. We are never left alone or stranded. So when a situation gets so bad, so disruptive to our psyche, so unsustainable, there's always another point that comes to our aid and offers us new possibilities, new choices, new awareness, new understandings, and we see life from a very different position, and we feel very differently, and we begin to think very differently. Therefore, we respond differently. So these pillars support our primary point, keeping it stable, keeping it anchored and steady. And there's actually some beautiful words, and you know me, Tanya, there's some beautiful words that I would like to use there, which would be balanced. These 2 pillars keep us balanced. They keep us grounded. They keep us true. And they keep us on course. We never become another point. It is always quite supportive. I'm sorry, I'm being distracted now. Being a 9 is a real shock, seeing the change and the stress. It is disturbing and difficult to cope with. Yes, Pam, if we can answer that later. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll remember to bring it back up again later.
Okay. So,
thanks, Liz.
These points, particularly our stress position, apropos of what Pamela has said, these positions are not to be avoided, which is our tendency because we don't like stress. But the position that comes up under stress is actually offering us a whole new way of being, a new understanding. And it's really to be explored within myself and to be wondered at. It brings new awareness and it should entice us. And there's always gifts in it.
And I was just thinking it maybe just jolts us out of our comfort zone, gives us a different perspective, which we, when you spoke about earlier, we kind of avoid certain things, or we want things to go along our normal routine way of thinking about things, feeling about things, sensing things. But when something out of the blue happens, a stressful situation, it's dynamic. We kind of then have these different facets within ourselves, or positions, as you've explained it, that do enable us to deal with the situation in a much more holistic way, perhaps?
100%, Tanya, 100%. And much as we want to avoid the stress, we must always remember that the soul will always and forever support us. And what is emerging in me is for the greater good of me as well as everybody around me. Even if I don't like it, it's giving me a kick in the butt, a real kick in the butt sometimes.
Liz, are you going to move on to some examples? I think you had some lovely examples for us.
I do, and I would like to dedicate these to Gary.
He's going to love it. He loves your exciting stories. For anybody who doesn't know, Gary is my partner in crime.
And a wonderful man, a wonderful man.
Okay.
So I actually chose 2 points. Point 5, which is the inward moving of the head, and point 4, which is the inward moving of the heart. So, and you will remember, Tanya, that I used to do a lot of modules, and we used to do all sorts of crazy things. And when the students wanted more and wanted more, I used to have to create all sorts of things. Now, what am I going to do now? And you'll remember that I created a module about myths and legends and parables and fairy stories. And so that's where these stories come from. So the students would have either a parable or a fairy story, and we'd all listen to it. So there'd be a class of 10, 15, 20 people. We'd all listen to the one story, and the next week we'd all come back with our own interpretation from our point. So these 2 stories that I'm going to read to you now are from that module.
Lovely.
So
I'm going to bring that diagram up for you, Liz.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So this will be point 5. Okay, yes. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay.
So these are the words of a point 5. Under normal circumstances, life runs pretty smoothly. I like it like that. No waves, no disruptions. I think long and hard about things, and I make very clear-cut decisions. If I'm in a stressful situation, or if there's a storm brewing on the horizon, I tend to pull inwards, batten down the hatches really tightly, and become invisible. Totally invisible. Now, this is a very normal way of being for anyone who lives at point 5. Withdraw, pull in, batten down the hatches, become invisible. However, he tells us, when I fell in love, this was extremely stressful for me. She breached the barbed wire fences I had erected in my mind, and this left me feeling alarmed and fearful. I wanted to erect more barbed wire immediately, but somehow being seen loosened the tightness in my head, and she had given me a life I never knew possible. Sentences and strange words began wandering around in my head in several directions all at once, going this way and that, ever circling round and round and round, and ending up right back at the beginning. And the words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. I was feeling strange feelings, and I was really confused. There wasn't any logic to anything. And these unknown feelings emerged, leaving me feeling shipwrecked in the middle of the ocean. Falling in love was an extremely stressful situation for me. However, he said, I learned to be more gentle with myself instead of controlling of everything inside. I also learned that being seen by another isn't so terrifying and can actually be a wonderful, joyful, vibrant experience. Also, she gave me a window to another world I never knew existed. She enabled me to walk out of myself, The whole experience, though terrifying, was utterly amazing. Wow.
Wow.
Well, this clearly verbalizes aspects of point 7 emerging in the 5. The confusion, no clear thinking, the distraction by all the strange words and sentences. Yet paradoxically, the myriad options and joyful ways of responding and being seen instead of just battening down the hatches and becoming invisible. So, if the point, and in this case, if point 5 can stay steady and not withdraw, not move in, not batten down the hatches, if they can stay steady regardless of the fear, and that's the hard point, and that's the practice for all of us. Stay steady. Don't withdraw and don't extend. Stay steady in the center. There's a huge shift in the psyche. And
Lovely.
go
I
on,
just
Tanya.
wanted you to I love how you're explaining that. I also loved how you could hear the point 5 wanted to, when he said, I wanted to create more barbed wire. So the desire was there to kind of carry on in the habitual pattern. But
exactly.
But actually something else was at work. And that's why we, as you've expressed, why we need those 2 pillars of support, because it is a much more balanced, grounded way to deal with situations in a more dynamic way.
Absolutely. And gain the benefit at the end.
Yes.
The joy of being seen. Actually, I'm here. I'm present.
Yes.
You know, look at me. It's okay. I'm not going to fade away. You know, it's wonderful exploring through stories. And another point 5, when we did Sleeping Beauty, which of course was for the point 9, but because all the different points were available in the class, points 9 story was Sleeping Beauty. And the 5 came back the following week, and he said, I just realized something. He said that I had locked away Sleeping Beauty in a tower in the castle of my mind. I locked her away. And you don't interrupt and say, who was the Sleeping Beauty? You just let the person talk. And he said, I'd locked Sleeping Beauty away in my mind, and I couldn't access her. I couldn't wake her up again. And he said many times, many princes had tried to get over the brambles, the brambles that grew up above the castle into the tower. And I couldn't wake her up. But one day, he said, I took action. I got on my horse with the intention of chopping down that, I think there were brambles in the Sleeping Beauty story. He said he went to chop down these brambles. And he said, as he was cutting them down, now, of course, these are the isolated compartments in the 5's mind. He said, as I was chopping them down, he said, roses began to appear, and they fell away, and they fell away, and they fell away. So I had access to the Sleeping Beauty in the tower.
Wow.
And I thought, my goodness. He said he felt assertive. He felt confident in taking action. He knew what his intention was. But he said he could also realize that he was wanting external control, not just internal control. So what I want to bring us to is when point 5 is aware of the pillars of point 7 and point 8. When point 7 and point 8 are integrated by the 5, when they are integrated, a whole new arising occurs. and that is termed the law of 3. So when point 5, let's say, which is me, and I access my 7 space and integrate it, and I access my 8 space and integrate it, then my 5 space becomes more powerful, more dynamic, more creative, more conscious and aware. And then a new arising occurs in the point 5. Isn't that astounding?
That's incredible, Liz. I actually
Hey?
got a sense. I got a sense of that 5 reaching a much more energetic space and a much more,
Yes.
much more an increase in energy. So that was the 8 space becoming more available. I love how you
Absolutely.
described it. Really, really incredible. So the 5 was able to explore different and uncharacteristic ways of being in these 2
Totally.
scenarios that you've expressed. Wow. And actually gone to very profound space internally. Reached it
Yes.
sounds like more like a sense of wholeness, a sense of
Yes.
integration, which you've mentioned as
Yes.
well.
So even if stress takes us to a horrible position or what we feel is horrible, we
Mm.
have access to those tools because we're only feeling stressful because we're not coping. So the thinking and the feeling and the responding are not coping in this situation. So the
Mm.
soul comes in and says, try this or a bit of
Mm.
this, you know.
Okay.
So would you like another one?
Please.
Okay, so this is now point 4 student. I've got loads of stories. A point 4 student says she has easy access to her feelings, not only her feelings, but your feelings as well. She said, I tend to live with them all. I live with my feelings and I pull in your feelings. And they tend to create turbulent textures and feelings and undercurrents in my heart. And she says, when I'm under a lot of stress, she said, the darkening, and I love these words, this is a very beautiful way of, creative way of the 4. The darkening currents of emotion seem to have a magnetic pull, and my feelings and emotions slam into one another. They crash and they collide, creating huge disturbances as they break in enormous waves that reach the shores of my heart. She said, each wave tries to swallow another wave, but there's always another and another. And she said, I am awash with feelings and turbulent emotions, and the dark, trembling waters tend to draw me in and down, deeper and deeper into my heart. And I begin to feel abandoned by others, by myself, and by life itself. And sometimes I feel as if I'm drowning.
Sure.
And then she said, when I cannot go any deeper, when I'm right at the bottom of the ocean, swept in all these currents, she said, I feel a huge shift in my heart and I'm catapulted outwards with a desire to be of service. I want to offer myself to be of service to another. And this is a great surprise to me. And I lose myself in another instead of in myself. I feel for them. I think for them. I desire what they desire. I help them and will be of service to them. This becomes of paramount importance to me. She said, sometimes I lose my face. My body changes, it alters, and in fact, everything about me alters. I lose myself in you. and I become what you need. So she said, I think point 2 is a great pillar of support for me, as without it, I would drown in the depths of my own emotions. And I become kinder to myself and much kinder to others. She said, point 2 keeps me steady and grounded. So there we are.
I've just brought that up for you. Yes.
Thank you. We're talking about point 4, who's gone deeper and deeper and deeper into themselves till they've abandoned themselves completely and they feel life has abandoned them. And then all of a sudden, the soul shifts and shoots them out. You can see the arrow pointing away to point 2. And then they will be of service to others and will be exceptionally kind. So even in stress, that point 2 pillar is supporting the 4 and not letting them drown, balancing the inward emotion with the outward emotion. And then she says, when she's feeling particularly secure and her relationships are on track and everything is hunky-dory, she said point 1 seems to emerge in her. She says she walks taller, and she said she feels stronger in herself. She said, I feel strong in my body, my mind, my heart, and my soul. I tend to stand tall, and I'm in control of myself and the situation. She said, I eat properly instead of starving myself. She said, I drink water instead of wine. And I exercise. She said, I am more responsible and objective, although I struggle with guilt. So even when we're feeling secure and life opens up a whole different ballgame for us, a whole new paradigm, we'll still struggle with what is termed the downside. But it isn't. If we feel the feelings and it just keeps us on track. So huge changes are always there when these pillars of support, well, they're always in place. And something we need to remember, and always remember, we did not create this. Nobody created the Enneagram. We discovered it.
Yeah.
By telling stories and sharing with each other, we're just saying, look here. And I don't have to believe or disbelieve anything anybody tells me. I need to look within and find out for myself. It's all there.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think what came to mind as you were going through those different positions, they're quite different. But now this is one student who's basically explaining internally what happens for her internally.
Yes.
And she's got quite a lot of insight because she can talk about it very clearly and acknowledge how these different positions actually support her. Come to her rescue. I could get a very deep sense of how she felt rescued. When that 4 position takes her deep down, way down internally into her own feelings, and then the 2 position opens up, which will actually bring her out, in order to be of service, as you've said, but in a way to also rescue her, it sounds like.
Yes. And what she became aware of, which was very interesting, that when we talked in class, because it's a spiritual awareness. She said it wasn't her that was of service; it was something flowing through her heart. And she said that kindness that flowed through her heart was not her kindness, and it softened her as well as offered it to another. So that's another,
so beautiful.
Brings another dimension to it as well.
Different dimension,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't her thinking, okay, now how can I save myself? Let me go in service of. It happened almost almost involuntarily.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
for me, that's a soul shift. The soul
Yes.
shifts at the right time, under the right
Mm,
circumstances, and everything.
mm,
I can't make it happen. There's no way
mm.
I could make it happen.
Yeah. I love these stories, Liz, and just sitting here listening to both of them. Now the point five, which was the point five is in the head center.
Yes.
So that's you could hear the energy, the person talking about their headspace and their thinking patterns. That was predominant. And now the 4 point, the beautiful story you've shared, where it's really all about those feelings and about the depth and
Absolutely.
the complexity of the feelings. So, I mean, I love how you juxtapose those two different types. I think that'll give us a lot of food for thought in the value of actually doing the
Yes.
inner exploration for ourselves and seeing where we sit on the Enneagram.
I think I'll have to open another module for our pillars of support. Create another module.
It really is lovely. Thanks, Liz. So those are the two examples you've shared for us. I just want to remind everybody, please ask some questions. We've got Liz here for another, say, 10, 15 minutes. We take bringing each time we keep her a little bit longer. She really only wanted to be here for 30 minutes
Half an
because it's
hour.
just too much. There's too much to talk about, and she could spend the whole evening talking to you. But we trying to keep it concise, and it really is an introduction to the Enneagram. It's not going to go into teaching classes
No.
because that you could do separately. Liz, what else would you like to share with us this evening before we?
I'd actually like to close with a Nigerian poet and author,
Okay.
Ben Okri. I think he's fantastic, and this little short thing was extremely moving to me. And he said, "We seldom try for that beautiful greatness brooding in the mystery of our blood, that spirit of the leap into the unknown, that joyful giving of the self's powers, that wisdom of going beyond in order to arrive." I love that.
Oh, that is
Okay?
lovely.
The
A Nigerian
mystery.
poet.
Yes, Ben Okri. I've got a book
Beautiful.
of his. The brooding of the mystery in our blood. And there's more space in us than there is matter. So the mystery is everywhere under whatever name. Now, my sons would tell me I talk too much, so I'm going to close now.
Well, I think what I wanted to say that poem really just reminds us that everything is right here waiting internally. It was here all along. What were those
Yes,
last words? That wisdom of going beyond in order
beyond
to
order
arrive.
to arrive. Yes,
So it
yes.
was here all along, and I love it. The mystery, the profoundness, beautiful. Thank you,
We have
Liz.
to go beyond the norm, our norm. There's no potential left in it. Or I can't say there's very little potential left in it. It's like
Mhm.
I need to go beyond myself, stretch, extend myself. So life does that to you
Okay,
or for you.
great. Liz, I think before we had that one question from Pam that you said you would want to come back to. Do you want to just bring it up again and just to look at it?
Okay, okay.
Um,
Being a
she
nine,
said
it's a
being
real
a
strong.
9. Hmm.
Seeing the change under stress, it is disturbing and difficult to cope with. So point 9 would go to point 6 would emerge under stress. And as point 9, the tendency, and remember, it's always a tendency, it's never a flat thing. The tendency for point 9 is to go to sleep to the self and to just trust the cosmos and trust, and it's okay to trust the cosmos, but it's not okay to just trust everybody and what everybody says. So point 6 wakes us up. Point 6 is like, it is a real shock. It's like, wake up, Pam, wake up. You don't need to trust everybody all the time. You need to think a little more clearly. It's about waking up for the point 6, for the point 9. So see what 6 offers you. They can offer you more balance, because 6 is like the inner world and the outer world. So there's more balance, there's more thinking, there's more creativity in the thinking, and there's less trust. So it's like, wake up now. Don't just trust everybody and everything. So that's just a little bit of that to answer that.
I was just thinking now with this question from Pam, and also just thinking back to the story you spoke about of the point 5. It's not initially comfortable.
No.
Maybe the one of the pillars of support, that offers us strength during our times of stress, maybe it's not comfortable because it's not a habitual way. We haven't become habituated in it. However, I think, Liz, maybe you can just correct me if I'm wrong, but the more we integrate these 2 pillars, then the more we can maybe see the values that it might offer us, because we can't make it happen. I mean, we can't make it go away.
No.
The stressful situation is there, whether we like it or not. And this pillar of support offers us a new position, a new thinking pattern, a new feeling pattern, perhaps, or a new way of behaving in the world that we might not particularly like, but if we integrate it, it actually offers us so much more.
Yes. So
What do you think?
Pam, look up your 6, all your work on your 6. And you have family members who are 6s, so it's not a bad thing. But it is a shock. I understand that. It's a horrible shock.
Yeah.
But I've learned to really value what was termed my stress position. There's some great value there.
Thank you, Liz. I don't see any other questions. So I'm just going, can I ask you one more question, Liz?
Yes.
I wanted to find out if anybody goes online and they do searches on the Enneagram, you'll see people talk about, they kind of give names to each of the types or the points on the Enneagram. However, how you're introducing it here, you're introducing it as points, 1 through to 9. Could you maybe comment on that for viewers so that, if they're looking at different things online, they can understand where you're coming from?
Thank you. Good question, Tanya. I like to refer to the point because it has a pattern and it's not personal. Calling a point a name, I've found over the last 25, 30 years, this person likes that name and this person rejects that point because they don't like that name. So there's a lot of personal likes and dislikes, and I tend to find it a bit confusing in a way. So just as an example, some point 1s, they don't like the term perfectionistic because they're not perfectionistic. There might be one area that they like perfect or really nice and neat, and then the rest of their life is chaos. And that's quite true. And 2s don't like to be of service all the time, and they don't particularly like, certain words. And and lots of people didn't like the devil's advocate, the term. So for me, it's about the pattern and the point and the gifts of the point. So I would rather say the point's name and you are the bringer of integrity. You are the bringer of loving kindness. Thank you, Gita. The naming of the point seems to place us in a box. And then I'll go back to the very first talk that I did, we are not little tin soldiers in little tin boxes. We are dynamic, creative, phenomenal beings. And equally, we are not a problem to be solved. We are a gift to be given. So I need to know where I sit on the Enneagram to be able to kind of consolidate and think, okay, this is where I sit. These are the gifts that I have to offer. And these are innate gifts of the point. They're not something I've developed in my human capacity. They are innate gifts of the point. They're not personal. So that's really what it's about.
Thank you, Liz.
Pertains to the point, not personal.
And I think it reduces the stigma. So I think that's also what I agree with Gita there. It reduces the stigma because, you know, then somebody likes to kind of write off behavior that they don't like in a certain point, and they kind of then use that label instead of just seeing the person as a complex human being. They and as more than they've got, as you say, reaching, you know, the spiritual side as well. They're complex. They're integrated. More than just one word to describe you.
Yes. And that's something I will never forget that Helen Palmer told me. And she said, we are already whole and complete. We are already integrated. We just don't know it. We just don't see it. Part of me knows it. Part of me sees it. But I don't have full conscious awareness of it. So that's the practice. That's the point, is to wake up.
Yeah.
And that's what all the great teachers have told us. Wake up.
It reminds me of that lovely. It reminds me of that lovely workshop you did on the mandala.
Yes.
Embracing all parts of ourselves, not just the ones we like to see and the parts of ourselves we want to just put in the light, but all of us, because we are complete and whole. Thank you, Liz. Okay, so we're on 10 to 8 almost, so I think we're going to have to call it an evening. Could I just ask you to tell us what you're going to be speaking about next week so that everybody can tune in next week for the last section in our series, our mini-series?
Yes. Thank you, Tanya. So next week I'm going to be talking about instincts. Now, instincts themselves have nothing to do with the Enneagram. They're totally separate. However, in my view, they provide an avenue through which the point flows. That is their value. So I'll be explaining that next week.
Lovely.
That's the advert for next week.
Yeah, I could see you could have gone into a whole explanation. So we will cover that next week. And I think tonight has been a lovely discussion. Please ask questions if you think of something later, you're welcome to just put a comment or a question in the event that's on Facebook or on YouTube. I think you can even put a little comment or a question there, and we can always pick up your questions next week if there's something that you are wondering about. Anyway, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for coming online, and we will see you next week.
Excellent. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Cheerio.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.